News at 5:30. This program is supported by San Juan Health Partners Urology, providing a wide range of personalized services for the whole family, including children. Our caring professionals are dedicated to helping meet your urology health needs with skill, experience, and service you need. For a complete listing of our services and to learn more, visit sanjuanhealthpartners.com or call 505-609-6300. San Juan Health Partners Urology, a division of San Juan Regional Medical Center. (8:37). It is Thursday morning on KSJE, November 1st. Good morning, everyone. I'm Scott Michlin, and thank you for tuning in this morning. Also, welcome to our viewers who are watching us live on the KSJE Facebook page and YouTube channel. That's where you can see all of the visual radio programs here from KSJE. It's 38 degrees outside our studios here at San Juan College with winds out of the west, 5 miles per hour, and our weather forecast today, mostly sunny skies, 56 for a high today, near freezing overnight, a bit warmer for Friday and Saturday with highs near 60, and overnight lows about 38 on Friday night, back down to 30 on Saturday night. My guest on the radio this morning, local archaeologist Paul Reed, is back with us. He is joining us live via Skype this morning from his home in the Taos area. Paul, good morning once again.
Good morning, Scott. Glad to be on with you.
Good to have you with us. And again, if folks were watching the first part of the program, they may have wondered why you were in the light, you were in the dark, and then you were light again. And it was the morning sun and clouds in the area, I suppose. It was affecting the picture that we saw.
It was, and I'm happy to say that the sun is shining fully. We had some really interesting fog banks rolling out to the south here.
Interesting. And you have some snow on the ground there, you were telling me earlier, right? You got a little bit of snowfall for Halloween.
We did. We got about 6 inches of snow by noon yesterday. So really, we had some a couple weeks ago, but I think this is the first big snow of the season. So I think the ski valley up just northeast of us here is they're probably happy up there with a good snowfall. I
would think they probably are. And if you want to send some over to our mountains, we wouldn't say no, probably. So thanks.
Well, it looks like an El Nino winter, they're saying. So hopefully plenty to go around for all the mountains.
Well, that would be a nice change from last year. So we'll look forward to it and keep our fingers crossed. But the reason that I wanted to also talk to you a little bit about was this article I passed along to you, and I'm sure you saw it as well, about this other discovery in Texas about some early projectile points, which are a bit different from some other arrowheads and projectile points that has been discovered previously, right?
Right. We've got a site. There's actually a couple in Texas that have been worked on in recent years, but this most recent one is near Buttermilk Creek, fairly close to Austin, Texas, sort of south central. And yeah, they've got some really interesting findings. They've got large spear points, which date into the period that archaeologists describes the Paleo-Indian, and and in this case even earlier. So we generally have dated the earliest time in sort of the Americas, both north and south, as the Clovis period, as early as about 13,500 years ago. What's been real interesting the last, at least 15 years is people have been finding sites that are dating earlier than that, and not just in North America. There's one well down south in South America, sites over a site called Middlecroft Shelter over in Pennsylvania. And we're really pushing the idea that Clovis is the first, evidence of people in basically greater North and South America. And this site in particular is really interesting because they have dates that they think are as early as 15,500 years ago, with a type of spear point that is distinctly different from the later Clovis points. The Clovis points are pretty well known to folks. They're not big, they're 3 or 4 inches long, but they have a fluted center, so that the folks were basically pressure flaking to create a groove in the middle, and then they're mounted on quite large spears, up to 5 or 6 feet long. And these were used to hunt mammoths, mastodons, the giant bison that used to roam North America. So we basically have a site that seems like pretty good evidence for what we now call pre-Clovis. And just expanding our idea of when people came into the area and were settling in North America.
Interesting. And of course, we have talked a little bit about some of those migration patterns, the idea that these early settlers came across that, and I know land bridge is not the right term for it, but the area from the Siberia area across and down through what is modern day Alaska and along the coast and things like that before kind of moving inland. Have I kind of told that correctly?
Right. We call the area up there sort of Beringia.
Thank you.
Yes. The Bering Sea, but with a whole lot of water tied up in the ice sheets, was a pretty nice area to go through. Certainly marshy and swampy in places, but lots and lots of animals to hunt. Shellfish and other sort of nautical resources, fish, plants to gather. So. Right. If we put the newest evidence from this buttermilk site and a site called the Galt site, also in that portion of Texas, together with the DNA evidence, then which suggests that we've got a pretty large population 20,000 years ago or so in Greater Beringia, perhaps starting to make their way into Alaska and down the coast, then we really have, I think, a fairly compelling new narrative, and again, new on a scale of 10 or 12 years. To suggest that we've got people coming into the area before this large expansion in Clovis times, 13,000 to about 13,000 years ago roughly. So it is pretty exciting. Of course, science moves forward by debates and evidence presented, evidence rejected by this group, supported by that group, and this is fairly controversial. There's sort of an old guard in North American archaeology that says Clovis is first, and that every site that claims to be pre-Clovis needs scrutiny, and I think all of us as scientists support this. But what we're seeing is more and more cracks, if you will, in the Clovis first facade. And I think as we go through more years of research with the DNA and the archaeology, that we're gonna come to a new consensus on this. It'll take a few more years, is my guess.
Interesting, and it's somewhat difficult, I guess. Well, maybe not really, to date some of these earlier finds, right? If you don't have a lot of other objects around, if you're just looking at a spear point or something, I mean, and you don't have any organic material or bones or remains or anything like that, it's a little harder to put the pieces together.
Right, and then some of the claims for early sites rest on pretty thin evidence, and maybe just an isolated fragment of a point that isn't quite Clovis, and perhaps in deep sediments. These particular sites at Buttermilk Creek and Galt have really nicely stratified deposits with the Clovis materials above these earlier materials, with distinct changes in the lithic technology, certainly some overlap. But this particular class of spear point looks different. It looks like something that was used in a different way from the Clovis points. And in this specific case, from what's called the Deborah Friedkin site in Buttermilk Creek, they've done a type of dating called optical thermoluminescence. Kind of a mouthful for you, but basically they're assessing the amount of time that artifacts have been buried, and have come up with dates in the 16,000 to 18 or 20,000 year range, which fits stratigraphically with what they're seeing in the dirt. So there's at least two lines of evidence. When plant materials are found, of course, those can be dated with radiocarbon, and particularly for plants that live and die every year, annual plants, you can get a pretty good dates on that. So I think they'll continue to compile information and sort of make the case for this. It's my sense, talking to other archaeologists and ones who are not particularly invested in one theory or another about this time period, that most archaeologists are coming around to this point of view and accepting these earlier sites. Now, as I mentioned, there's an old guard of folks who are in the Clovis first camp, we might call them, who are certain that all these sites are probably just Clovis or later, and there's been errors made. Right. So people are entitled to their opinions, but we go through a process, and in particular at these sites, different groups of scholars, geologists, geomorphologists, people who really understand sediments, in the case of geomorphologists, have been invited to look at the site and really confirm its authenticity. So, there's a lengthy process here that we go through. But again, I think on a scale of years, we'll end up with a new consensus here, and this will start to be written into the textbooks, and it's at that point where we're beginning to see that now.
Sure, but it goes to show, I guess, the science of archaeology and what is and how it's constantly evolving with some of these new discoveries that are challenged and maybe beaten back or proved and challenged again or what have you, with some of these new things that we're still learning about our history, our area, our continent, North America, and things like that. It is constantly under scrutiny and under more examination.
Yeah, it definitely is, and I think it's safe to say that it's a moving target. And we've talked a little about the process of science, quite a bit actually on the show, and it's at times frustrating, both for that group of us doing it, and I'm sure for people looking in from the outside. I was told fairly recently that, quote, all you archaeologists do is argue. But it's, aside from the obvious personalities that exist in any profession that all of us are familiar with, there are valid points of view that, people express based on the research they've done versus a different research program. And so, and I think I'm an optimist. I think ultimately we end up having better knowledge and understanding of these different phenomena that we're interested in. And but this is sometimes making the sausage, if we can use that analogy, is not the prettiest thing.
Right. True.
But to circle back to our discussion from the first segment, we make the sausage, we process things, we talk, we debate, we argue. Hopefully, no fisticuffs. And then, if enough people agree, we put out volumes like the new one that we just put out on Aztec Solomon in the Middle San Juan. So, and then we try to impart that to, the members of the public that are interested in it. So, it's a long process, but I hopefully a rewarding one. I certainly feel that it is.
Sure. Well, and again, for many of us, it's always interesting to see these articles that come out that kind of question some of the other long-held beliefs of what we think we know and what we thought we knew, and maybe there's this other theory out there, and because we don't necessarily maybe know every single thing there is to know about our history and things like that. When we look at the picture in this article, Paul Reed, I mean, it's hard to tell, to me, not an archaeologist, that this is any type of anything more than maybe just a piece of rock on the ground. But I mean, that takes a trained eye to figure out what's a spear point and what's not.
That's right, and archaeologists train for their entire careers to be able to look at fairly subtle differences and say, here are the commonalities, but here's what my training suggests is a really important difference. And I think that's what we're seeing in this particular case of these sites in South Central Texas. Of, here's a clear trajectory, understanding of Clovis-style projectile point technology, and those are amazingly similar if we look at Clovis points from really across North America all the way north to Canada and Alaska, and well south through Central America into South America. They look to some degree like they were manufactured, and because people mapped onto the technology, they understood that these blades, these large spear points, were useful for bringing down large animals. There's certainly an element of artistic creation in this too, and that's where we sort of have the intersection of art and technology. Very interesting, but for the folks who have spent the years doing that, when these new styles of points come along, and again, they're stratigraphically lower than Clovis, that the bells go off, and then you have an understanding that this is something different, and let's put some attention and focus on that. And
right.
So again, we have preliminary information on the site, and the archaeologists are going to continue to refine that. And so I think it is, we could probably say this of different time periods, but I think it's a pretty exciting time in this field of study to look at the new discoveries coming in and how it's going to change what we think we know and what we thought we knew.
True. About
the past.
Very true. Well, Paul, as always, it's a fascinating conversation, but we are out of time. It always seems to happen to us that we could talk about this all morning.
We definitely could, and I appreciate the opportunity to discuss with you and the listeners. these very interesting findings.
Indeed, and congratulations again on the book that you have written with your colleagues. And again, it is now available all over the place, I'm sure. And
right, Larry's going to get some in at Solomon Ruins, and
good.
We're working with Aztec Ruins, of course, since there's a strong focus there.
Sure,
to sell it locally as well.
All right, excellent. Well, Paul, again, thank you so much, and send the snow over our way when you get a minute.
I'll place the order.
All right, fair enough. That's archaeologist Paul Reed, my guest here on KSJE. Back with more. We'll check on the economy when we come back in just a moment here on KSJE. The time is 8:51.